The story begins in the kingdom of demons. The Dragon King was imposing, looking at Min Saigu, who was kneeling on the ground, coughing up blood. A huge hole marked his chest, his breathing was weak and irregular. 100 years ago, an otherworldly meteorite fell into the demon realm, the Dragon King declared. Although you played with this kingdom wielding that strange power, this is where your journey ends. He then told Saigu to declare his wish, asking him what was the longing that led him to search for the dragon of the demon realm. Saigu looked at the Dragon King with a firm gaze, and, coughing, said that he wanted to return to Lug. That he called home. With blood running down his face, the Dragon King told Saigu that, for someone who risked his life to challenge him, his wish was pathetically trivial. However, it was impressive that Saigu had come all the way there knowing that it was a wish that could never be granted. He added that Saigu should not feel bad, because the power to return home, the dimensional sphere, was inside his heart. Hearing that, Saigu smiled. He asked the Dragon King if he had any idea how much he had suffered to find the dimensional sphere. It was a whole 100 years, 100 fucking years in that damn world. The Dragon King then raised his hand, and told Saigu to consider himself lucky, as he would end his insignificant existence there and now. But before the blow could reach him, a sudden golden light enveloped him. Saigu smiled, saying that he could finally finish the battle. The light shone brightly, blocking the Dragon King's attack, and a magic circle appeared on the ground. The Dragon King had no idea what was going on. Holding his bleeding hand, which had been cut by the light, he asked Saigu what kind of light that was. He was even more surprised to see that Saigu's wounds were healing. But he soon realized that it was not just an ordinary healing, it was regeneration. Saigu got up, wiped the blood from his mouth, completely healed, and asked the Dragon King if he would hand over the dimensional sphere on his own or if Saigu would have to tear it out of his heart. The Dragon King panicked as it happened. It is said that Saigu was no ordinary warrior. With a calm smile, Saigu gave her 3 seconds to hand over the sphere. When time ran out, Saigu punched through the Dragon King's heart, saying that he had waited long enough. The Dragon King's body fell lifeless to the ground, and in Saigu's hand was the dimensional sphere. A voice coming from nowhere, belonging to Frey, told Saigu that it was disappointing that 100 years had passed only to end up with a demon dragon sphere. Frey called Saigu a glutton, and said he had a strange taste. Saigu corrected Frey, saying that it was a dimensional sphere, not just a ball, and ordered him to shut up. He threw the sphere into the air and swallowed it, causing a magic circle to appear below him. He smiled, knowing that he was finally returning home, to his disciples, his younger brother, and to Earth. Somewhere in a forest, Saigu was lying on the ground, woke up and got up. The first thing he did was call the parasite, referring to Frey. Frey replied, asking what Saigu wanted, and if he needed food. Then he said he was busy vomiting from dizziness inside his stomach. Saigu realized that Frey had made it through in one piece, and called him a disgusting creature, ordering him to be digested at once. Frey asked if he was sure about that, warning that the result would not be pleasant at all. Looking around, Saigu told Frey to shut up before he threw up himself. He asked if that place was the Earth. Frey mocked him for not recognizing his own home. Saigu explained that the landscape of the Earth varied depending on the location. After observing for a moment, he noticed that the mana flow looked similar to that inside a portal, but he wasn't sure. Frey commented that Saigu smelled like a wimp. At first, Saigu ignored him, but soon panicked as he noticed that something was wrong. Wrong with his mana. Frey asked if Saigu had been a fraud all along, and said he was ending their partnership. Irritated, Saigu replied that the same problem had happened before. Frey asked what he meant by before. Saigu explained that it seemed to be a side effect of dimensional travel, exactly as it happened when he was sent from Earth to another world 100 years ago. His attributes had dropped drastically. At that time, he only had 20% of his maximum strength. Frey laughed at Saigu's weakened state, and ordered him to recover quickly before being expelled. Saigu got upset, saying it wasn't that easy. Last time, it took decades for him to fully recover. Surprised, Frey said that he was canceling the contract, because he couldn't use even half of his incredible abilities. With the pathetic Saigu mana, Saigu argued that his mana was not completely unusable, and then he noticed someone, a girl running, while breathing heavily. She mumbled that she was fucked, as she lost her companions while running for her life. He had no idea if they were okay, but more importantly, He wondered why there was already an orc so early in the Masmora. He shouted for help, but tripped over a stone. When the orc approached, Saigu effortlessly defeated him with a single punch, and asked the girl if that place was Earth. Stunned, she stammered that she did. Saigu asked again if it was Korea, and what year they were in. Still in shock at what he had done, she confirmed that it was Korea, and that the year was 2037. Saigu calculated that he had been absorbed into another dimension in 2027. Questioning whether 100 years in the demon realm had been spent as only 10 years on Earth, he asked who the current president was. She replied, Choi Daso. Saigu was stunned, asking if he meant that head. That muscular tough who had one less eye. The girl had no idea who he was and thought he was playing a character. Saigu couldn't believe that Choi Daso was the president. He commented that there was probably no one better for the position. He then asked her if they were inside a portal, noticing the stranger flow of mana. Excited, she corrected him, saying that it was not a portal, but the tutorial tower. Saigu had no idea what that was, so she explained. The tutorial tower had emerged some years ago, as a portal for hunters. By completing it, hunters could awaken abilities and win techniques. The higher the level of awakening, the better the guilds they could join, so everyone was rushing to finish it as quickly as possible. Upon hearing that, Saigu commented that, back in the day, they woke up perfectly fine without such nonsense. He stretched out and asked if it was enough to complete the tower to get out, wanting to know how long it normally took. She replied that, in general, it took 8 weeks, but skilled hunters managed to do it in 3 weeks. The record was held by Ryujuan, who had completed it in 3 weeks. Saigu thought about that while the girl was panicking, seeing a troll tiger approaching. She urged him to flee, but Saigu commented that 3 weeks was too long. Even with the troll tiger getting closer and closer, Saigu remained motionless, thinking with his eyes closed. The girl shouted at him, asking if at the academy she had not been taught to run away from troll tigers. Before the creature could attack them, Saigu broke her teeth with a single blow, leaving the girl in a state of so. Then he declared that 5 days would be enough to clean the tower. Later, in the office of the Empire Guild Master, Min Singhun, someone reported that a hunter had just left the tutorial tower. Sin Jun found it impressive, as it had been 8 weeks since the entry. However, the report indicated that the hunter was not on the original entry list, and that there was no record of his entering the tower. Now, he was causing a ruckus outside. The assistant showed a video to Sin Jun, who immediately turned his attention to him. It was his older brother, going back a few minutes in time. The girl could not believe the absurd scene before her eyes. Saigu had completed the tutorial tower in just 5 days. Saigu commented that fighting definitely seemed to speed up recovery. It seemed that about 25% of his strength had returned. They received an announcement. The tower had been completed, and stats were being calculated, while skill compatibility was being analyzed. However, the system was unable to measure the stats and abilities of Saigu, the gate of the tower. Then it opened up. Saigu left, happy to have finally returned to Seoul. On the other side of the tutorial tower door, Saigu and the girl were being inspected. A muscular man arrived at the scene and asked why there was so much confusion. The person next to him commented that there seemed to be a problem, even though the door had just been opened. The muscular man remembered seeing the pretty girl on the list. He then asked the inspector what the problem was. The inspector replied that 2 people had left through the door, but one of them was not at the check-in. The muscular man, the leader of Team 2, looked at Saigu. I found it hard to believe that Saigu had cleaned the tower and walked out without a scratch, given his slim physique and unkempt appearance. With a confident and arrogant expression, he pushed the inspector aside, determined to personally take care of the situation. Inflating his chest, he asked Saigu who he was, and why he was not on the entry list. Saigu calmly replied that it was because he had not entered through the entrance. The man rebutted, saying that if Saigu had entered through the door, he must have exited the same way. So how could I leave by the exit without having entered by the entrance? Saigu calmly replied that it had simply happened that way. The man laughed and commented that Saigu did not respect his superiors. Frey whispered to Saigu, noting that the man seemed to enjoy talking nonsense. The man put his finger on Saigu's forehead and called him an idiot, accusing him of using a camouflage skill. He threatened him, demanding that he explain how he had entered the tower, or he would suffer the consequences. Saigu's expression remained unchanged, which further angered the man. The man threatened to rip her face off with his bare hands. Saigu laughed slightly and told the man to shut his mouth, because his breath reeked of garbage. Stunned, the man asked if Saigu had lost his mind. Saigu nonchalantly massaged his neck and told the man to fight as he had threatened to rip his face off. She urged him to act fast as his breath was horrible, advising him to breathe as little as possible. Unable to contain his anger, the man tried to hit Saigu. Saigu told him to shut his mouth and, in an instant, it was all over. Sin-jun and his assistant, who had just arrived, were surprised to see the man and his subordinates unconscious on the ground, their heads swollen. The inspector explained that the person he had earlier reported for causing a disturbance had got into a fight with the security team and then disappeared. Sin-jun asked if there was any security footage that showed the person clearly. They showed the footage, which revealed the person taking down 5 hunters in mere seconds before disappearing. The inspector suggested that the individual might be a stealth skill user, as he was not detected. Sin-jun disagreed, stating that it was just a matter of speed, nothing more. He focused intently on the recording, and recognized the person as his older brother, who had not changed anything in 10 years. He immediately ordered a search alert to be issued and mobilized all members of the Empire Guild to find him. He emphasized that no one should face him. Instead, they were to inform him that they were Sin-jun's subordinates and take him to the guild. On the way out, Sin-jun wondered where his brother had been all that time. He decided to take care of the girl who had left the tower with Saigu. He asked her if she was the person who had left the tutorial tower. Embarrassed, she admitted that she did, but clarified that she had not done anything. It was the other one who did everything. However, they had gone out together. Sin-jun observed that she came out faster than expected, so she must have gained some talent. She shyly mentioned that she didn't know if that was a good thing, but she had obtained an rank skill. Hearing that, Sin-jun decided to recruit her to the guild before even the final evaluation. He promised to adjust the terms of the contract to his liking, and suggested that he sign with the Empire Guild. She became extremely happy and asked if I was serious. At that moment, someone arrived and commented that, despite the name Empire, the guild acted like a gang of criminals. Sin-jun recognized the person by his voice and warned him to be careful with his words. It was the hunter Ryugege. A hunter of S-jun rank sarcastically asked if Sin-jun was offended, saying that he had chosen his words well. The other S-rank hunter, Choi-sun, master of the White Lion Guild, commented that it seemed that Sin-jun had been outclassed. It seemed that everyone had come together after being contacted by the association. Juin observed the security team and speculated that the unregistered awakened mentioned by the association was the one responsible. Getting down on one knee, he commented that the person was quite daring for causing a ruckus right after leaving the tower. Choi-sung agreed and suggested that the person probably possessed a high-level skill, becoming a top-notch talent. Juin suggested that whoever found the person first would have the right to claim her, regardless of the method used. Choi-sung agreed, saying they should search individually but keep each other informed. Before leaving, Choi-sung handed the girl a card and told her to choose calmly, as anyone would accept her with her awakened abilities. Ji-hwan left, promising to get in touch if he found the person. Sin-jun knew that Ji-hwan would not keep that promise. Outside, Ji-hwan ordered his assistant to gather all of Honggen's side-ranked hunters, form a team, and send them to find Min Sin-jun's brother. In the next scene, Saigu went to a nearby restaurant and ordered fried chicken. Frey commented that, after returning to Earth after 100 years, the first place he went was one that only sold fried birds. Saigu told him to just try it. He would understand why he ran there like a madman. After eating the chicken for a while, Ray exclaimed, "But what the hell? This is crazy. He wasted his whole life. Was this a golden legacy fried bird? That's how it was supposed to be. The taste was amazing." He asked Saigu how he had survived in the demonic realm for 100 years without eating something like that. Was he a psychopath? Saigu ordered Frey to be quiet. It was filling him with humanity. Frey replied that it was fine, but to hurry up and give him more. Don't eat it all by yourself. But, just to clarify, in this conversation between Frey and Saigu, Frey's voice could only be heard by Saigu and no one else. After finishing eating, Saigu thanked the waiter and left the restaurant. As they were walking through the city, Frey asked where he would go next. Saigu replied, "Where else to? I would go home, of course. After walking for a while, they came to the street of his house. Finally, Saigu came home. Frey asked if that was his home. Saigu replied yes as he started to open the door. But as soon as he entered, his face turned pale. Suddenly, he heard a voice asking if he had returned. He also heard his father's voice saying he was late, and his mother's, asking if he was hungry. They were ready to eat, so he should call his younger brother, Sinjun. But all that turned out to be a memory from when his parents were still alive, and they were young. He ran to them, saying that he had returned and exclaiming. Then they would eat soy stew that night. The mother told them to wash their hands before eating. Now, back to reality. Saigu realized that his house was in ruins, completely destroyed, and that no one was there anymore. The cold, lifeless air surrounded him. Saigu stood still, stunned, unable to say a word. After a while, he slowly sat down. He muttered that he still could not remember his parents' face. Although they say that forgetting things is a gift from God, for him it was a curse. 100 years in the demonic realm, an endless bloodbath on a strange and bloody planet, the numbing of human senses, and the stopping of time, the wear and tear of body and mind, for an unbearably long time. It seemed that the process of forgetting would erase him. So he desperately clung to the only two memories he had before entering the demonic realm, the memories of his younger brother, and the memories of his disciples. Those memories not only became simple memories, instead, they grew as persistent obsessions and attachments. But it was okay, because thanks to them, he survived for 100 years. And also, thanks to that guy, Frey, who accompanied him throughout the demonic realm. Frey then told Saigu that his house was lonely. The place where they lived in the demonic realm seemed more welcoming. Saigu replied that yes, but that there was no chicken in the demonic kingdom. Frey agreed that that was logically correct. There was nothing to discuss about it. With a smile, Saigu said that he only intended to go there once anyway, and it was better for them to leave. I didn't want to waste any more time there. He suggested they start looking for the children. He wondered if everyone was doing well these past 10 years. His younger brother, Sinjun, should be fine, right? But suddenly, as I was walking, a voice rang out. We found him. And, at the same instant, Saigu was surrounded by some armed gang members. On the roof, a red-haired guy who seemed to be the leader smiled sideways. It was a bummer to find this bastard. He looked at Saigu and said, Nice to meet you. You must be the one who caused the commotion at the exit of the tower, right? He introduced himself. My name is Bayanakman, a low C-rank hunter. He asked Saigu if he had any idea how long they had been looking for him, but the protagonist only thought. And what was he supposed to do with that information? To comfort them. Akman got irritated, and asked if Saigu hadn't heard that they were from the lower guild. Saigu replied that whether it was short or anything else, he didn't care. He asked what they wanted from him. Admin said it looked like Saigu didn't understand his situation, so they would make him crawl on all fours. With a smile, Saigu replied that it would be the other way around. The world of hunters was really a mess today. Now even the gorillas were becoming hunters. What a wonderful world had this become. Agmund was furious when he heard that and said that it wouldn't stay that way. They should give him a lesson before they take him away. His body began to glow with lightning, and, at the speed of light, he ran towards Saigu, ready to punch him. With a loud crash, the blow threw Saigu into the air, his body going through the wall on the other side of the street. But, while Aigu was flying, his hands were still in his pockets. He seemed calm, as if nothing had happened. With a dry laugh, Akmu insulted him, asking who he called a gorilla. The rest of the band members laughed, saying that this insignificant guy had irritated the boss. They said that Saigu had fainted before even taking his hands out of his pockets. They said Agman should hit Saigu one more time. Who knows, maybe he died. But Saigu was still lying down, impassive, watching a system notification. He was using his system to verify Agman's power and attributes. The system showed that Agman was rank C, and his ability was instant acceleration, which doubled his speed. If the user's physical strength and body structure supported him, he could move even faster. Saigu then asked Frey, well, do you want to eat this ability? Frey replied that it was the first time he had eaten a skill since he came to Earth, so he wanted to try it. Saigu replied, it's okay. In an instant he was up. Akman and the rest of the band were shocked. That guy, they thought he passed out, but he just got up. But before they could say anything, Saigu ran at the speed of light and knocked Akman out with a punch, causing his face to kiss the ground. As he fell, Akman wondered what the hell was going on. That guy was faster than light, and I couldn't even feel his energy. The rest of the band stayed in so. What's going on? That guy took down the boss with one punch. Then, Saigu reached out his hand and started using his skill. He ordered Predator to absorb Akman's ability. Instantly, talismans began to surround Akman. After a moment, the extraction of the skill was a success. Now, Saigu had acquired the C-rank instant lightning ability, along with all of Akman's attributes. With a dry laugh, Saigu said, "So, this Predator skill also works on Earth." Ray said it was okay, but it tasted worse than the chicken. The rest of the band was furious. One of them gnashed his teeth and shouted for everyone to attack Saigu at the same time. Everyone advanced with a battle cry, but Saigu remained impassive and told Frey that they should use the newly acquired skill with those guys. Frey replied that he understood. In the blink of an eye, Saigu's body began to glow with lightning, just like Akman's before. But because Saigu was much stronger and his body had greater durability, he could move even faster than the original owner of the ability. In an instant, he moved at high speed, attacking the gang members before they could react. They didn't even know he had hit them. They only realized it when they lost consciousness and fell to the ground. One of them thought, "Damn," he started to strengthen his body, holding his dagger as he prepared to attack Saigu. But Saigu dodged effortlessly, as if it was an attack in slow motion. Then, he kicked the guy in the stomach, making him spit up blood. With this fight, Saigu also stole another skill, Vital Point Punch. When activated, the body automatically aimed at the opponent's vital points, making the attacks more effective. Especially if the user was holding a weapon. But Saigu sighed and said, "This blade is dull. Who would use such a dull blade?" Still, he said he would borrow it for the time being. Combining Vital Point Punch with Instant Lightning, he moved at the speed of light, aiming at the other band members. But as he was about to stick the blade into the neck of one of them, he heard a voice calling his name. Saigu paused for a moment. The voice was so familiar to him that he decided to see who it was. Looking back, he was surprised to see the person. It was his younger brother, Sin-jun, who had now grown up after 10 years. With a smile, Sin-jun called his older brother. 20 years ago, the portals opened in a peaceful land, and the world fell into chaos. Everyone panicked, not understanding what was going on. No one had any idea, because it was the first time they had seen something like this. Then, suddenly, monsters began to come out of the portals, and the first awakened ones appeared. People whose powers were activated the moment the portals arose. At that time, there were no policies or laws to handle the situation. It was an era of savagery, where everyone had to make do on their own. In that chaotic world, Seigu and Sinjin, two brothers who lost their parents early, had to survive anyway. Saigu, the older brother, was one of the first awakened, and left school to become a hunter and support Sin-jun, who was still a helpless baby. Back then, Sin-jun asked his older brother, "Won't you go to school today?" Saigu replied that there were no classes, that he was going to work. With a sigh, Sin-jun asked if it was his fault, if that's why Saigu was skipping school. But Saigu hit him on the head, and said no, it was because he was lousy at studies, so he decided on his career early. Holding his stomach, Sin-jun asked, "So, when are you coming back? Will it take you long?" With a smile, Saigu replied not to worry, he would be back soon. But since then, no one has heard about Saigu again. It's been 10 years since he left and never came back. Now, after getting out of the fight, Saigu went to his younger brother's house, and was surprised to see that the building was huge and well built. He looked out the window and was even more surprised to see the river so close. He thought, so Sin-jun bought this place by himself. Without taking out a loan, he was happy to see that his younger brother had achieved success. Sin-jun replied that it was nothing special. He had earned all the money with the skills he learned from Saigu. It was a house where they had to live together. That's why there was also a room for him. But, looking at his older brother, Sin-jun thought, I can't believe it. This really is my older brother. How does someone who they couldn't find for years suddenly appear after 10 years? Sai Wu, after observing the place, asked Sin-jun if there really was a room for him. Wow, I can take care of my younger brother now, he said. praising Sin Jun for working hard in the last 10 years. But, with a smile, Sin Jun rejected the compliment, and said that no, the one who had really done all the hard work was his older brother. With a sigh, Sin Jun asked if Segu had any idea how long they had spent looking for him. Where had he been all this time, and why was he only showing up now? With a smile, Segu slapped him on the head, and told him to sit down, as he had 100-year-old stories to tell. A while later, they sat down with some drinks and snacks, with a laptop in front of them. Then, Seibu told everything that had happened, how he entered the demon world, and how he returned to Earth. After hearing the story, Sin Jun summed it up. So, 10 years ago, when you defeated the fourth demon lord, you were transported to another dimension by an artifact he had. In that other world, you met Predator, a being who could extract people's abilities. For 100 years, you grew up with that ability, and searched for dragons with dimensional magic. You reached the Dragon King, defeated the Dragon King, and took an orb that was in his heart. Then, you used that orb to return to Earth. Is that all that happened? Saigu replied that yes, and Predator, whom he calls Frey, also crossed over to Earth with him, and is now inside his body. Sin Jun was surprised. Is it some kind of possession inside your body or something? Saigu replied that instead of possession, he was more like a parasite. Hearing that, Frey got a little irritated, and asked Saigu if he wanted to have a bloody diarrhea. Saigu then told his younger brother not to take him so seriously. He knew it sounded absurd, but at least he should have known his older brother wasn't crazy. Sin Jun replied that of course he believed him. After all, it was his own brother who was saying it. And, since they no longer lived in a world where that kind of thing seemed absurd, I just hadn't connected it to anything right away. Anyway, he told Saigu that for now the important thing was to know that he had returned. Saigu replied, okay, so now it's my turn to ask. Then he asked her. He asked Sin Jun what had happened during his absence these past 10 years. Who allowed a guy like Choi Da-Su to become president? Sin Jun explained that, since you disappeared, Choi Da-Su shamelessly took credit for the defeat of the fourth Demon King. With that lie, he obtained the title of the best hunter of the first generation, and, using that manufactured status, ascended to the presidency. Now, he continues to create policies that harm our guild. Sin Jun said that he couldn't wait to see Choi Da-Su's face when he found out that his older brother had returned. Seigu added, the guy's intentions are obvious. It is the only SS rank in South Korea. That's ridiculous. He must have done something to remain the only SS rank. Seibu then asked, by the way, those guys who attacked me earlier, those Haijong Gan guys, are they Choi Da-Su's thugs? No. The guild of Choi Da-Su is called Infinite. There are several representative guilds in South Korea, collectively known as Aptagram, and the Singin Guild, Empire, is one of them. The others are Infinite, Baha, White Lion, Fighting Warrior, Blue Flora, and Frozen Soul. Singin said that, among them, Baha is the second largest guild. Big. It belongs to the second-generation hunter, Ryuji. With a malicious smile, Sin Jun said that he would take care of today's problem. Saigu didn't have to worry. Noticing the malicious smile on Sin Jun's face, our protagonist thought that his younger brother, in these last 10 years when they were separated, had become a little more rude and ruthless. Saigu then asked, by the way, what about my disciples? Sin Jun was a little surprised, and said that they had been living apart for a while and no longer kept in touch. He continued, Cylon returned home, and Kong Yoba is now under Choi Da alone. Saigu said, this is a bit unexpected that she joins Choi Da-Su, but what about Min Jun? Sin Jun replied, Min Jun was killed. Hearing that, the protagonist was left in So, who died. Who killed him? Did they find the culprit? Sin Jun explained that his body disappeared, so they couldn't find out who was responsible. The only ones who could kill a hunter were other hunters or unregistered awakened individuals. At that time, even the Hemex was involved in the research, but there were no breakthroughs. Saigu got confused. What is Hemex? What does it mean? Sin Jun explained that Hemex was the Special Hunter Research Unit. It was an international agency that operated on the front line of hunter-related crimes. They had the authority to investigate and arrest all awake criminals, so they were basically a hunter's police. Sai Wu asked Sinhun, do you have any connection there? Sinhun answered yes, but asked, are you really going to join them? If you need an investigation, you should use the information team of our guild. He then advised Sai Wu not to get involved with such a dangerous place. But Saigu replied, "It's okay, he doesn't just need information, he needs something else." With a sigh, Sin Jun told his older brother that hunters deal with crimes like murders. To go there now was too soon. He had just returned to Earth. He should rest and regain his sense of combat. But Saigu assured his younger brother, he spent 100 years in the world of demons. What hasn't he done already? What battle hasn't he fought yet? Hearing that, Sin Jun said, "Ah, he almost forgot." Before leaving Earth, his older brother created a nickname for himself. He was called the God of Battle and the first awakened of the first generation. Even after 20 years, he should still have his fighting sense. Sin Jun then said, "If you think so, I understand." He then told Saigu about a man named Gigi, who was the manager of the HMEX. I would try to get in touch with him. Meanwhile, Saigu was looking at the laptop, analyzing the information that Sin Jun had just told him, and he muttered, "I've seen this face somewhere before." After seeing the photo, Sin Jun was surprised to recognize who it was. He said the man was Wang, the leader of the HMEX Gangbuk district team, a fifth-generation hunter and one of the first hunters of the first generation in the world. He asked, "Sai Wu, do you know him?" Sai Wu replied, "Yes, I know him. His real name is John Hu." 2 days later, at the HMEX headquarters, in the Gangbuk team office, inside the building, the team leader was screaming. He said those second-generation guys didn't know anything. He was furious. His assistant asked him what was wrong. John Hu replied that he had just received an order from above. They had assigned a new rookie to their team. John Hu scoffed, saying he didn't like them. Those greenhouse-bred guys, their old brains must have been rotting. Hearing that, the assistant smiled and thought to himself, who is the real old man here? But John Hu did not stop. Still upset, he continued. In the old days, during the lawless zone, when everyone first woke up, the early days of hunters were all about strength. They even wrote wills before going on missions because they could die at any moment. He added, "By the way, I already told you about the time I almost died in an attack 10 years ago." The assistant sighed. Yes, I've heard that story 1,000 times already, but John Gu, it wasn't over." He ignored the assistant's reaction and began to remember again. Get this. When he was a rookie, he received a fatal blow, and his group was on the verge of death, about to lose a lot of power. But at that moment, a healer with incredible abilities appeared, saving him and his entire team. When saying that, he mentioned the name Bying Hoi. At that instant, the office door slammed open, and a voice rang out saying the exact same word, Bying Hoi. The team leader was shocked, turning towards the door to see who else could say that iconic phrase. It was Saigu, who asked John Hu why he had changed his name. That was confusing people. He asked if John Hu remembered him. He was the savior that time. Upon recognizing him, John Hu began to sweat. His expression changed to astonishment. "What? The hunter Min Sai Wu. What are you doing here after 10 years? John Hu introduced Sai Wu as a new hunter who had joined the Ganpu team. As he was a new member, John Hu emphasized that there should be many information that Saigu didn't know, so he instructed the team to provide it to him immediately whenever necessary. He also reminded everyone that, as veterans, they should treat the new recruit with the utmost respect. A girl named Sun muttered to another guy, saying that John Hu's behavior was contradictory. It was strange that the great leader of the team acted like this. The guy told him to shut up, suggesting that from the way the team leader reacted, Saigu was definitely not an ordinary recruit. John Hu then instructed Sun to follow him to the conference room for a quick briefing for the new recruit. Another member questioned whether Sai Wu could be a 3-star hunter who entered as a rookie. In the conference room, John Hu politely asked Saigu if he would like coffee, and if he preferred blend or Americano. Saigu replied, "Mix." The guy humbly showed Saigu the mixed deployment uniform and asked him his size. Sun, confused, said she had not received any instruction despite the report, and did not know what kind of information to provide to the new recruit. As the data manager of she didn't know what was expected of her. Saigu said he needed the records of all hunters killed in the last 20 years. He asked her to summarize the data and pass it on to him. Surprised, she mentioned that 20 years of data was too much and that they would have to send a report to the Hunters Association. John Hu interrupted her, shouting that she had enough experience to figure it out on her own. He then approached Saigu with the coffee and assured her that the data manager would take care of it quickly and efficiently. Sun adjusted his glasses and asked Saigu if he meant human deaths. Saigu clarified that cases officially recognized as murder by the HMAC would be served. He also asked for a list of hunter-killers who were still at large. He clutched his coffee cup in anger, as killing an awakened one was almost impossible, unless the attacker. It was also an awakening of equivalent strength. If they managed to kill a high-level hunter like Min Jun, the culprit was probably a professional. Even if the culprit had already been captured or killed, if he was an awakened one, there would be a record of him in the organization. For now, tracking them down was the priority. She asked where to send the information, and Saigu instructed her to send it to his phone for the time being. Someone came in and informed John Hugh that they had received a request for support from the police. A turf war had broken out between gangs that included woke members. John Hugh was inclined to let the police handle it. I charged, thinking it only involved low-level bums, but the guy mentioned that one of the gangs was Cerebus. John Hoy found that problematic, prompting Saigu to ask what Cerebus was. Sun explained that Cerebus was on a completely different level from normal gangs. They were involved in traffic of weapons, contract killings, and even in the alleged trafficking of hunters. Hearing about the hunter trafficking, Saigu became interested and suggested that they go together. In a shop, a battle had just happened. Many bodies were scattered on the ground. Kong Hu, the Cerebus Guild's second-in-command, commented that the Bloodless Blinders field captain was no big deal, at least not in front of him. The red-haired guy, Hecken, Cerebus third-in-command, retorted by saying that it was unfair for Kong Ho to say that, since half of the enemies had been knocked down by his butcher knife. Kong Hu laughed and told Hecken to try to defeat him if he felt left out. Hecken replied that Kong Hu should just wait sitting down. I would beat him one day. Kong Hu laughed and commented that they couldn't do anything without him. He was happy to have stopped being a hunter and joined the organization. Another guy asked Kong Ho if they should start marking the territory. Kong Ho agreed, stating that the place now belonged to Cerebus. Suddenly, an explosion occurred. Hecken panicked and asked who was responsible, if there was still a bloodless blinder lost out there. The person responsible for the explosion was Seigu. Hecken shouted at Kong Ho, asking if he realized that messing with the... While they were arguing, Seigu appeared and commented that, the way Kong Ho was talking, he must have killed some hunters in his life. Seigu told him to show more of his skills. The Cerebus members had no idea who Seigu was, wondering who he thought he was to appear there alone. Hecken, worried, asked Kong Ho what they should do, since Seigu did not seem to have the posture of a public official. Kong Ho said the only option was to show his strength. Then, he activated his ability, Full Body Armor, a rank B ability that formed an invisible armor on the entire body. The duration was determined by the conjurer's mana, increasing physical defense by 30% and magic defense by 10%. They advanced against Saigu, but before Kong Ho understood, it was what was happening. He had a vision of someone on the other side of a river, his grandfather greeting him. Kong Ho was crying on the floor. When he opened his eyes, he saw that all his companions had been killed, and he was the only one left. Seigu told Frey to devour Kong Ho's B-rank ability. Frey got excited, as it was a decent skill. Kan Ho couldn't believe that everyone had lost to one man. He asked Sai Wu why he had taken things so far. Coughing, Kan Ho insisted that they had never killed a hunter. They only survived with their bodies. Sai Wu admitted that he knew that they had never killed hunters. Anyway, he never believed that weaklings like them were capable of that. Kong Ho then asked why Saigu had attacked them. Saigu replied that he wanted to check how strong the awakened criminals had become, as they looked like a lost case. It was better to cut them early. John Hugh and the others rushed to the scene. John Hugh asked if Saigu was okay, as they had finished cleaning the top floor of the club. Saigu, ignoring the concern, commented that they took a while. Then, he put his foot on Kong Ho's head, and told John Hugh that he forgave one high-level boss, and killed the rest. He asked if that was okay. John Hugh replied that, technically, capturing them should be the priority, but if Saigu had been attacked first, it was allowed. As the HMEC operated as an international organization, they followed standard regulations. Thus, The officers were required to wear body cameras to verify the legitimacy of their actions. John Hugh could not believe that Saigu had exterminated the Cerberus Guild, despite his cruelty. Although Saigu was known as the Mad Dog, John Hugh had never realized how brutal he was. Saigu awkwardly admitted that he forgot to use his body camera, and quietly asked John Hugh to cover it up. John Hugh, having no choice, reluctantly agreed. Saigu added that he had been attacked first, pointing to the blood on his clothes. John Hugh assured that he believed him, although he clearly did not. It was obvious that the blood was not from Saigu. At the same time, someone made a call to Herb, a rank hunter of the Hong Kong Red Guild. The informant told Herb that the Cerberus Guild had been completely exterminated, without even being able to fight back. The second in command, Kong Hu, had been arrested, while the third in command, Hekin, who had been ordered to watch, he was dead. Hurt finally arrived in South Korea, and at the airport, a group of men approached him. One of the men informed someone by phone that the hunter Hurt, affiliated with the Hong Kong Red Guild, had just entered the country, and that they would now head to the designated place. One of the men approached Hurt, bowed to him, and said, "May the deceased rest in peace." He introduced himself as Lee Hong Yong of the Korea Hunters Association. Without paying attention to the greetings, Hurt asked where his brother was. Hong Yong replied that the body of the suspect, Hekin, was currently in the apartment of forensic medicine of the hunters. He said Hurt would have to accompany them to check on the body, complete the necessary procedures, and then be escorted to his designated accommodation. With a wry smile, Hurt said, "Ah, a suspect. Are they trying to say that my younger brother is now a suspect?" Hurt then asked the men in suits if it was true that the one responsible for his brother's death was affiliated with the HMEC. The men replied that they could not answer any questions related to that. With a serious face, Hurt then asked if he had permission to leave the premises after hours. Programmed. The officers replied that this was not allowed. You were to stay at your designated accommodation until the prearranged departure date. If he went out without authorization, under the international law of hunters, he would face forced deportation, in addition to disciplinary sanctions and corresponding penalties. As he had already been informed of all the rules and regulations, they said that they would now escort him to the forensic medicine department. Hurt's face was red with anger, but he tried not to demonstrate. He muttered to himself, "So they're just going to leave him locked in the apartment, without being able to get out? Is that what they're saying?" But the officers were already leaving, waiting for him to follow. Then, as they were walking, Hurt called the man next to him, "Ryu." Ryu replied, "Yes, sir." Hurt said to Ryu, "Find them, whoever killed my little brother." Then, they started following the officers. As they were walking, Hurt said, "Whoever killed his brother will find him, rip out their hearts while they are still alive, and make sure they feel pain." In another scene, Saigu was having a conversation with his younger brother. Si-jun told Saigu that, 2 days after Min Jun's murder, the house was completely ransacked, but Saigu was still not convinced. He explained, "A hunter's mana is like a fingerprint. You can reveal your code, attributes and classification, right?" The investigating hunters at that time assumed that the culprit took everything in order to erase any traces of his presence. The house was completely ransacked to 2 days. After his murder, not a single item containing his mana was left behind. But Saigu questioned, "Are you sure it was the real culprit who did this? And if it was just a random looting, it's not as if the real culprit had turned the house upside down." Pointing to the list, he continued, "If someone looks at the list of objects, stolen objects, most of them were valuable. And with this level of disorder, there's an even greater chance that they've left evidence behind." Saigu added, "If erasing mana traces was the real goal, setting the house on fire and burning everything down would have been much more effective." Si-jun asked if Sai-wu was saying that someone took advantage of the empty house after Min-jun was killed. Sai-wu replied, "Yes, he checked the HMEC crime files. There were more cases like this than I expected." On the way out he said, "Looks like we'll have to shake some fences." Si-jun was confused. "What are you trying to do now?" Even if the resale process of Min Jun's house took a while, many years have already passed. There was no way Min Jun's stuff was still out there. But, with a smile, Seiga replied, "We won't know until we check it." He said to Saijin, "See you tonight." And so, a few weeks passed. But it was exactly what Saigu had said with such confidence. "I hadn't found any clues yet." He was so convinced of himself thinking it would be an easy task. Saigu exploded and said, "Why are there so many fucking thieves in this tiny country?" A week had already passed, and I had not managed to see any evidence or find the real thieves. Frey said, "I have a good instinct, trust your big brother. I'll point you in the right direction." Then, he told Saigu to go to the right. He didn't even complain, he just listened, assuming Frey was his older brother for now, and headed to the right. But, after following the indicated path, he screamed and exploded, releasing all the rage that was boiling inside him. "It's a dead end, you idiot." But Frey smiled, for his instincts were not wrong. Suddenly, Saigu heard some people chatting in the distance, and a voice said, "Have you heard the rumors?" Saigu quickly hid to listen to the conversation. The person talking was a rat-headed man, chatting with his boss, a man whose face looked like a hamburger. The rat-headed man said, "The hacks have been cracking down on the receivers hard. Only yesterday, the entire young area of Jumpo was eliminated." The boss replied, "Are you serious? Without a warrant or a report, why would Hmex do that?" The rat-headed man said to the boss, "It's the Hmex. They have full investigative authority over all operations in the world, and the right to execute punishments against any other awakened criminal on the spot if they resist. If those guys catch you, not only will you end up in prison, you could end up dead." The boss exploded and said, "But they are only government dogs. If they get killed, it's over." The rat-headed man replied, "True, any skilled hunter would prefer to join a guild. The pay is better. That's why there are no high ranks in organizations like Hmex. But whoever is attacking the receivers this time is not just any lunatic." The man then said, "Since we specialize in stolen goods from hunters, maybe we should relocate our warehouse this time, so that the Hmex don't catch us." But, just as they were about to leave, Saigu stepped out of the shadows. "Where exactly is that warehouse?" Hearing that, the boss and the rat-headed man got scared. "Who's there?" The boss looked around nervously. Saigu smiled sideways. "Well, it's time to confiscate your warehouse." Seeing him, the rat-headed man said to the boss, "I think it's him, the Hmek bastard who's been taking down the receivers." The boss quickly picked up the phone and started calling his men. "Move to Sector 2 now. It's an emergency." But, while the boss made the call, Saigu remained impassive. He kept pushing them. "Where is the warehouse?" He said he was busy, so they should start talking, unless they wanted to die. A few minutes later, a group of men began to approach. One of them asked, "Boss, what's going on? Who the hell is this guy? Is he not an imposter? Is he really the one who's been knocking down the receivers?" The boss laughed. "He's an idiot who doesn't even know where he got in, even if he's from the Hmek. If we bury it in cement and throw it in the ocean, no one will ever find it." Saigu bowed his head. What are these guys saying? Instead, he thought the situation was being reversed. One River smiled. Actually, these guys were making his job easier. They had grouped themselves together. I would consider it a favor. Then he turned to Frey. "We're going to be using a skill for the first time in a while." Frey smiled. "A skill costs a chicken as payment." Saigu replied, "Done." Then, he began to conjure an ability. Lightning, and a talisman spell enveloped his feet. A bright light blinded the boss. "Damn, I can't see." With a loud bang, Saigu unleashed the ability known as Shockwave. As the name implies, the ability affected everyone within the radius, electrocuting and stunning them. Saigu then walked up to the rat-headed man. "So, are you ready to show me the warehouse now?" The rat-headed man, terrified, stammered. "Cuckoo, who the hell are you?" Saigu smiled. "I am a lunatic." Sometime later, he was taken to the warehouse and searched the whole place for what he wanted. Among his belongings, Saigu finally found a manabak. Frey arched an eyebrow. "This is the manabak you were so desperate to find. He smells like a nerd." Saigu nodded. Yes, he recognized it immediately. At least one thing remained intact. This is Min Jun's research diary. Through the diary, Saigu noticed that he had a security spell. It wasn't just any blockage, it was a formation that wouldn't open unless it recognized its owner's hand. Frey asked, "So, that book didn't open?" "Right. That means you can't read." Saigu replied, "That doesn't matter. What I need is not the book, but the mana inside it." Then, he dialed a number on his phone and made a call. "Ah, it's me. I have a dozen criminals awake. Bring in the cleaning crew. And also bring the car. We have a place to go." In another scene, some time later, Seigu arrived at a neutral battle zone, where underground techniques and strange abilities were being traded. It was a marketplace for everything skills-related, a place called Black Skiffle. Inside one of the buildings, a woman was sitting at the table playing with a deck of cards. But he wasn't just playing. She was calculating like a shaman. He took a specific letter and smiled. Oh wow, looks like an interesting guest is about to arrive. She was Munian, one of the 12 bosses of Black Esquifle. Walking down the street, Saigu said out loud that not much had changed compared to 10 years ago. Frey commented that Saigu was quite popular. Everyone was looking at him. Noticing that his abilities seemed incredible, Frey suggested that he extract someone's abilities and eat one of them. But Saigu refused. That was a neutral combat zone, so it would be annoying to have to fight there. Suddenly, a woman blocked his path and said, "It's been a while." She said she had been waiting for him. Sometime later, the shaman and Saigu started talking about business. She noted that even after 10 years, he had not changed at all. Saigu replied, "Yes, I guess so." She was still the same too, no name. The woman asked, "So what have you been doing for the last 10 years that you haven't contacted?" Saigu said it was a long story, and even if he told it, it wouldn't be very interesting. Holding out the book, he said that, instead of talking, he wanted her to extract the mana contained in it. With a smile, the shaman said that Saigu was still getting straight to the point, as always. Okay, that was something he liked too. He brought a glass and a knife next to the book and asked, "Do you remember how this works, right?" Saigu replied, "Yes, I understand." He took the knife and cut his hand, as his blood would be used in the ritual, to extract the mana from the book. As his blood began to drip into the glass, he reflected on how mana, once used through skills or magic, was almost impossible to return to its original state. However, that impossible fact became possible, thanks to this woman named Anam. With her ability, she was famous for being known as a Manoke. This ability was an illegal means, a power that defied causality, a force that went against the laws of nature. Skills of this type were often associated with crimes, which is why society viewed them with distrust. She took a sip and commented, "It seems that life itself is dancing on my tongue. Everything is ready, it's done. Fresh and delicious blood, prepared in a cleaner way than ever." Seeing this, Frey felt uncomfortable. Definitely, this woman's ability is not healthy, even if he is a demon, he thought. Taking the ceramic jar, Saigu mixed his blood with the shaman's, sealing a small contract. He thanked her for a job well done, and got ready to leave. "Oh, you're leaving now?" she asked. Saigu replied, "Yes, I still have things to do. I'll be back next time." She smiled and said, "Always so mysterious." Now outside, Saigu sat in his car, ready to go home. However, Frey complained. That place gave him chills. "I didn't want to go back there again." Saigu frowned. "Why was I so demanding today?" Frey muttered, "You and that woman are two perverts, absolutely depraved." Saigu sighed. "What are you talking about? I just made a small cut on my arm. It wasn't a big deal." Frey was given. "Okay, there's no need to insist on that. So, where were they going now?" Saigu replied to the Ancient History Research Institute. It was there that Min Jun was killed. Later, after driving, they arrived at the Research Institute, a very tall building. Wasting no time, Saigu walked to the door and forcefully opened it. Frey sighed. "Now that you have power, you just force your way into places. This is trespassing." Saigu ignored his concern. "Don't worry, this building belongs to the Empire Guild. It was something that Saijin bought and preserved. It's lucky that his younger brother has taken care of this place from the very beginning." Deep down, Saigu knew that he wasn't the only one who had a hard time coming to terms with Min Jun's death. Looking around, I could see memories of when everyone was still together, 10 years ago. Bending down, he muttered, "You need to see the memory of that day, when Min Jun was killed." Frey hesitated. "Are you really going to use that skill?" Saigu replied, "Yes." With a loud bang, he activated Mana's recall ability, and the place was surrounded by talismans. The exact level of this ability was unknown, but by using it, the emotions experienced by the owner of the mana in a certain place could be reproduced. The completeness of the manifestation depended on the quantity and quality of the mana used as a medium. Opening the jar he had obtained from the shaman, Saigu combined its contents with his own blood and with the mana from Min Jun's book. As the mana spread through the surroundings, it began to reveal the incident, the vague memories of what had happened. Frey sighed. It's because Saigu's mana reserves are so small that he can't see the memories clearly. Saigu replied, there is nothing I can do. Mana's recall ability doesn't show the target's memories, only their emotions. Getting up, Saigu muttered to himself. The Min Jun he knew was never a weak hunter. And if this was done so quickly by a single person, that meant that the culprit was highly skilled. Now, carefully observing the vague memory, Saigu realized that, before he died, Min Jun said a few words. He started trying to put together what Min Jun was trying to say. He could see the letters 5 and P. He wondered if they were in the right order. Suddenly, she also noticed that the culprit was wearing a veil, making his face almost invisible. The culprit then said one word, hierarchy. Now, putting all the pieces of the puzzle together, Saigu asked himself, 5, I, P and hierarchy. So Min Jun wasn't just part of the research institute, he was part of an organization. Noticing Saigu's expression, Frey asked if he was okay. Saigu wondered what Frey meant by that. Frey explained that back in the demon realm, Saigu always talked about his younger brothers and disciples. Even after 100 years, he never forgot them. The first thing he did when he arrived on Earth was to look for them. And now, he had just seen his disciple die in front of his own eyes, and remained completely impassive. Did he have a heart of steel? Saigu ignored Frey. Instead, he commented that his vocabulary was improving. He asked where Frey had learned those words. Frey replied that he learned it at Sphinx. Then he continued, saying that, at that moment, Saigu's emotions were so intense that they made him nauseous. But he didn't show it on the surface, or he just couldn't show it. Saigu replied that he was fine. After 100 years, his emotions were destined to collapse at some point. Suddenly, the door creaked open, and a guy wearing a mask, clearly a figurehead, called Saigu and said, "You're my Saigu, right?" He scratched his head and added, "Where the hell have you been wandering all day? Seriously, making things so damn problematic." So he continued, "Anyway, just come easy. There's someone dying to see you," but Saigu started telling. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He realized that the guy was not alone. He had brought 6 men with him. Saigu then said to the guy, "You're acting too arrogant for someone who's running around with 6 insignificant mice." The man frowned for a moment and said, "You are cunning, Saigu, to realize that so quickly. This makes things easier." So, he gave Saigu a choice. Choose one of the 2 options. First, we leave you tied up, and you come quietly. Secondly, resist if we cut you and drag you bleeding. Wasting no time, Saigu extended both his hands, and said that it was better to follow them willingly, than to be cut off. The leader then ordered his subordinates, "Hold him." One of the men replied, "Yes sir," and started walking towards Saigu. The instant I was about to reach him, his body was split in half, and the blood shot out. With a malicious smile, Saigu said that he actually preferred the cut option. Frey added that this had been a hoax, calling them fools. Seeing their fallen comrade, the remaining men screamed, and prepared to kill Saigu immediately. But, as they were about to attack, a figure emerged from the shadows, and ordered them to stop. It was Gord of the Red Gilda, who declared with a smile that, from there, he would take control. Saigu was his prey. Gert asked if he was the one Vin Saigu and if he had killed Hekin of Cerberus, his brother. Frey commented that, of all the ones he had found so far, Gert seemed the most appetizing. Saigu replied that he didn't know which brother Gert was talking about, or if he always asked the name of the trash before disposing of it. The words angered Gert, who advanced with his fist aimed directly at Saigu's heart. Bam! Saigu blocked the hit with ease. Then, he asked if Gert wasn't a rank hunter, as his skills were not bad. Gert wondered if Saigu was a healer, as he used regeneration and instantaneous. He told Saigu not to trust himself, and increased the force of the blow, creating ripples in the air, but Saigu dodged the second attack. One of Gert's men couldn't believe that Saigu had blocked his guild master's attack. But another told him to stop being separated, and join the fight. Quickly again, Saigu appeared in front of him, and said that he couldn't let him interfere. He knocked him out, and then used the instant lightning skill again. He commented that it had been a long time since something had become so interesting. In an instant, he appeared next to another enemy, and grabbed his neck. Everyone was surprised to see a healer with acceleration abilities. Another asked, "What the hell is Saigu really?" Even Gert was surprised, as Saigu analyzed all his movements and dodged them with minimal effort. None of the accelerated type hunters Gert had encountered in the portal had such a high level of accuracy. He thought, this guy, how wide is his field of vision? He is not an ordinary person. He decided to give everything immediately. But Saigu told Gert that he was wrong about something. If a crime was committed, whether by your brother or your son, they should face the sentence. Now, you are dying by my hands because they are awake criminals. So stop acting like you're being unfair. Those who should feel unjustified are the citizens that your brother hurt. Gerta gritted his teeth in rage and shouted for Saigu to stop talking nonsense. You're saying that all criminals deserve to die. You don't know anything about the life my brother led, and you shouldn't think that you can do whatever you want just because you have authority. Hecken had no choice. He became a criminal just to feed and take care of me as a child. I was just trying to survive as I could. With vigor, he told Saigu that he would pay with his life for having trampled on his brother's existence. Activated the ability of Ranka, Wolf Claw, Heavenly Strike. The ability dispersed condensed mana, materialized it and launched a synchronized bombardment that followed the movements of the target. Saigu knew that he couldn't dodge with movement alone, so he told Frey that they should use an ability. Frey complained that Saigu was overloading him that day. I am just a fragment of mana and I am exhausted. Saigu begged to use the ability just one more time, promising that he would be able to rest afterwards. Then, they activated the Neutralize ability. His rank was unknown. Neutralize identified the opponent's skill category and mana level. He calculated opposite attributes and neutralized them using a magic circle. The effectiveness of the ability depended on the conjurer's mana control and observation skills. Gert couldn't believe that Saigu was able to use Dispel. The gray-haired man found it impossible. It didn't make sense that Saigu had a high-level skill capable of overriding a stale hunter's technique. He gritted his teeth in concern. Revenge or whatever, we're already at a disadvantage. We should not give up at this point. Saigu used the lightning ability and appeared behind Gert undetected. He asked if all the people who went through the same situation as Gert's brother chose to become criminals. Don't try to sell me cheap sentimentality. That's out of fashion now. She kicked Gert in the stomach, but Gert was quick enough to block her with his hand. His guild worried about him, but he shouted for them not to get involved. These skills cannot be used consecutively. If Saigu is a healer, I have the advantage in stamina, so he will eventually run out of mana. When that happens, I will quickly eliminate him in hand-to-hand combat. He decided to crush Saigu with a concentrated blow of the Wolf Claw, Heavenly Strike, but Saigu jumped to dodge, grabbed his head, and kneed him in the jaw, telling Gort not to use that ability. He hit him again, telling him not to use it, hit his face, then his cheek, repeating, do not use. The building is already in terrible condition. You're going to take responsibility if it collapses, you fucking criminal. Furious, Gort threw a punch to push Saigu away, but he dodged. While Saigu was still in the air, Gert shouted for Ryu Jampang to catch him. Jampang activated his ability by saying, first you say not to involve me, now you say to act. What should I follow? In the end, chains surrounded Saigu, tying him up. Gert advanced with a clenched fist, saying that he would explode his entire body, leaving no opportunity to heal it. Unfazed, Saigu dispelled the restriction, and then congratulated Gert for becoming a criminal along with his brother. He activated the Theft of Life spell. The skill was of SS rank. Absorbs the life force of a target within range. Within seconds, Gert's life force was drained, leaving him unable to do anything. Jampang's face was full of fear. I couldn't believe that something like this was supposed to be a skill of a healer. Saigu cancelled the skill and told Jampang that it was pretty insulting for him to call the first skill he woke up as a hunter something like that. I was never an ordinary healer from the very beginning. Instead of using mana to heal the life force, it's about controlling it directly. This method is known as Spirit of Life Sorcery. Now, I was looking at January Pang. January Pang panicked, telling Sai Wu to wait. I wouldn't resist. But Sai Wu slapped him and told him to shut up. She got up, wondering if she had cleaned everything up. He then checked to see if his camera was working properly this time. He called John Hugh, asking if the camera was recording correctly. As you can see, I didn't start the fight this time either, so this counts as self-defense. With a surprised expression and tones, John Hugh replied, yes, the video is streaming correctly, but you pressed the live stream button. and there are currently more than 5,000 viewers. Some time later, inside an office, two elderly men and a woman were arguing about how the live broadcast had become a complicated situation for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The man with glasses asked, "Since when did the MANHWA start broadcasting live the suppression of awake criminals?" The other man replied that this had been done for about 2 years, serving as a promotional video for the international headquarters of the. It is about live streaming the process of capturing criminals through integration with social networks. But basically it was a failed project during its testing phase. Such a high-quality video cannot be made by someone ordinary, since there are no trained people in the MANHWA. The man with glasses then commented, "It seems that an amazing talent has recently entered the MANHWA." He asked why someone so skilled would have gone to MANHWA. The woman said that was not the problem at the time. The most important thing was that the dead person in the live stream was a guest hunter from the Hong Kong Red Guild. After verifying the authenticity of the video, there were no legal violations committed by the MANHWA according to the current law. Despite that, suddenly, someone came into the room and apologized for making them wait. The person was Choi Da-so, the current president of South Korea. He asked them, "What is the problem?" A few days later, in the Empire Guild cafeteria, Saijin and Saigu were chatting while eating. Saijin worriedly told Saigu about the live broadcast that had been disclosed, but Saigu was not listening. He was busy devouring the food. Frey commented that Saijin shouldn't disturb someone while eating, and told Saigu to just shut up and eat his food. Saigu commented that the coffee shop there was on another level, saying that he now understood why they called it an oversized guild. Then he asked Saijin if he could eat there every day from now on. Saijin replied, "Sure, but at least listen to what I'm saying now." Saijin felt that his older brother had become strangely obsessed with food.